Hello everyone, it's me HawkeyeG with another campaign starter guide. As you could probably have guessed, we're doing the Huntsmarshal's expedition this time, having just done a faction intro for them. I discussed this there as well, but this campaign doesn't necessarily seem to be people's favorites. There's definitely some criticism out there, and at least mixed reviews of it. However, I've rather enjoyed it, and it does have a lot of interesting mechanics. Plus, it's just nice to play the Empire somewhere out of the Empire itself. If you are enjoying these videos, please leave a like and subscribe. It always helps the channel, and it's nice to know what people like. With that being said, there is plenty for us to talk about here, so we'll try to get into it. As usual, we'll do like a quick overview of this campaign's progress, then talk about some important building and army composition considerations, followed by organizing some short-term goals and how to pursue them, and then wrapping up with discussion of long-term strategy and how the mid to late game might play out for you. So, let's go! Alright, so here we are at the start of the Mortal Empires campaign. We're a couple turns in here, but just to kind of give the overview, I'm going to take just a few examples here and kind of fly through things. You start out at war with Talaxlan, and they do have the major city. Fortunately, you have much cheaper archers for Marcus, and you have better ambush. Basically use these to your advantage if you can, right? The ambush defense, success, and upkeep. Those are what are going to be able to kind of get you to take these guys by surprise. They're going to be able to afford much cheaper armies with the skink cohorts. They'll be able to spam it and spread out. You got a lot of running through the jungle. So it's important to take them out first if you can. Next, I would generally recommend taking out the blue skulls and probably wiping out the drowned. There's also an entire province over here that's just empty, and so that's basically what the early game is and what our short-term goals will be when we talk about those. That's how the campaign starts, and that's what you should focus on. Moving ahead a decent chunk to turn 51, we've done what I said, taken over these provinces, kind of secured our starting area. From here you may want to go north and take out Hexwaddle. You will have to do that for the campaign. Otherwise, you probably want to go east and wipe out the Vampire Coast, perhaps south to wipe out Itza if they're strong, or perhaps even to the southwest to take out the Sentinels of Jati if nobody's really strong. Basically, depending on the current balance of power, you want to probably target whoever's strongest to prevent them from being able to actually challenge you. But at this point of the campaign, you kind of have a lot of options in front of you, and so you just kind of pick where you need to go from there. You're going to have a decent amount of strength and income at this stage, so you should be able to afford your second army, right? And just kind of go from there. Then moving ahead here a little bit on turn 91, you can see we got things pretty secured, ended up taking out the Vampire Coast. It's a little bit soft in the center, but quite frankly, these guys are, yeah, you can see, oh, they got a full army here, and it's mostly skink cohort, so we're going to decimate it even with this little hodgepodge kind of army, and we'll be able to sweep them out. Puts you in a really good position, and from there you can kind of round out the rest of the campaign. You can see I'm already strong enough, none of these guys are really going to be able to contest me, and the more of them that I push away, the better I'll be able to go. Major threats should be wiped out at this point, so you should be feeling pretty safe and secure. Potential alliances forming, or at least you can start affording the research to get boosts to the different order races at this point in time. The remaining tasks are to clean up and conquer the rest of Lustria, as well as wrapping up your actual victory conditions. We'll review those in the actual guide a little bit more, but just mostly taking control of Lustria and the Galleon's Graveyard, and then destroying these factions and reaching maximum acclaim. So that covers everything for the overview. I just kind of like to take a couple of glances at how the campaign develops over time. I feel like this one's pretty straightforward, so I think you got what you needed to see. From here, we're going to move forward and talk about any potential building or military considerations that there is for this faction and how they affect your playthrough. Now, the building and military considerations part of this particular guide is actually going to be kind of short. I don't really think there's much to say on buildings because of the fact that you literally can't make some of them, right? I mean, at this point, we've got some of the stuff unlocked, but, even if we were in Tier 4, you can see I must reach the acclaim level required. So there's really not much to say. You're pretty restricted on buildings. The one important point I would make is at the start of the game, even if you have no acclaim, you can still build the foundry. So you can get yourself handgunners and mortars, even with no acclaim, right? Or with like base level acclaim. So it's good to just kind of have that in mind. Probably something you would go for in a typical Empire campaign anyway, but just something to be aware of, really. One thing on the buildings I'll note, though, is that you want to keep track actually of what resources are in your area, because one of your Wolfheart's hunters is going to have, that's basically his quest line, like gain access to the following resources through ownership or trade. So kind of keeping an eye on the map and trying to figure out like where is their lumber, where is their iron, right? Those are things that you're going to want to keep an eye on. It's not necessarily a, building order tip, but just something to be aware of. As for military, again, it's pretty straightforward. Marcus has cheaper archers and huntsmen. You can spam archers in the early game and do just fine with that army. Getting some mortars and handgunners is pretty useful to you. And honestly, you can get those before you can get huntsmen into this army naturally. Keeping archers or huntsmen as primary for Wolfheart, I think, is kind of important. It allows you to afford another army a little bit early on if you have mostly those. I mean, obviously I don't here, but we're not doing that great, as you can see, right? This is pretty expensive to have a second army with the variety that I have in here. Might as well drop these ogres with dual weapons for something else, but we can't recruit huntsmen yet. But especially because the huntsmen get all of these extra abilities in here as well that are going to boost them. Well, just these two, but they're pretty big ones. So just some things to keep aware of. That's all I really have to say about building and military considerations. Like I said, there's not that much to talk about in this particular campaign. So with that, let's jump back to the start of the campaign and talk about what some of your short-term goals should look like to get a good foothold in this campaign and set yourself up for the rest of it. So, I mentioned it in the overview already, but our short-term goals, to be specific about them, will look like this, right? We want to eliminate Tlaxlan, right? We want to take this province for ourselves. We want to eliminate the Blue Vipers. I called them the Blue Skulls before, I always do that. I'm probably going to do it again. We want to eliminate them and potentially eliminate the Drowned. I mean, we probably will want to, because we want this province to ourselves, we want this province to ourselves, and there's a province here in the Mist that belongs to nobody that we also want for ourselves. Those are the three provinces that I would say you want to secure before you're able to move into the mid-game successfully. You could see at turn 50 I have it done. You don't necessarily have to expect to have it done by then. But in a way, 3 provinces by turn 50 might not sound like much, but it gives us a really secure position to round out the early game with. Not too hard to defend, but also gives us a lot of options as to where to attack or explore next. You can probably get more done in the early game if you have good luck or make good decisions with your initial target. It's just hard not to waste time running around in the jungle chasing these guys down. I mean, I can tell you that in this campaign, I spend the next 5 turns tracking this guy here, and we'll see that when I get to turn 11, what ends up happening. So, but yeah, that honestly, the most challenging part of this campaign is this start, right? It's getting the momentum on track and in your favor, being able to wipe these people out in an efficient time frame. And just making sure that you're on track to kind of gain power and gain a foothold before things get sorted here. We have so many other playable factions here that they actually maintain a relatively equal balance of power, right? They kind of stalemate, and that's what we want to see. But obviously that doesn't last forever, right? So you start out at war with Tlaxlan. You basically just use archer spam and ambush to give you the edge that you need here. The territory is too dense and hard to navigate, so you want to try to trick the enemy into either running into you or going back to a nearby city, right? If you're just trying to chase them, you're going to be chasing them through this jungle back and forth all the time, and I mean, it's just kind of how it plays out regardless, but as much as you can, like if I can ambush here, move forward, ambush, trick them into going to the city, or maybe trick them to going to my city, right? The ambush success chance, I've looked at this before, but the ambush success chance increase, that's huge. 50% is a lot. And like I said, just spamming out archers, just because their cost is reduced, it makes it a little bit more viable. I mean, obviously they're not any stronger, but it's still just more financially manageable and doesn't slow you down your progress as much, right? Basically, the start, you're just chasing a lot, and it undoubtedly will eat up a lot of turns. So, if you're lucky, you'll kind of get an ideal scenario where you've got the enemy army chased into a city, you have enough of an army and some reinforcements that you expect that you'll be able to take it. Right about turn 5, you should actually get your first set of Imperial reinforcements. Obviously, I would recommend going with the siege weapons, like having a tier 4 siege weapon at, tier 0, basically. I mean, technically we're at tier 2, whatever, right? Being able to get that great cannon and the Outrider grenade launcher, it's kind of nice. I do feel like the grenade launcher Outriders drop off in effectiveness early on, but that's a pretty specific thing. You'll have to feel it out for yourself. But yeah, in an ideal scenario, you have your troops ready, you have a full army ready to go to take the capital. Regardless of whatever losses, and if you have to wait a few turns, this is a worthwhile take, right? Shutting them down. Having the enemy army there so you can wipe them out in whole is great. Like I said, it's just a lot of running around and posturing in the early game. Be patient and set yourself up with the right opportunity to save yourself time in the long run. Now, of course, the sad reality is that because, well, you saw I'm playing this on very hard, the AI has the ability to spam out armies. And like I said, these skin cohorts are just going to be so cheap that you're going to end up still having to play more time playing the defending dance, right? It's going to take you time to recover because we're not going to have warrior priests yet for the replenishment increase. Meanwhile, in this campaign, actually, the Blue Vipers came and finished off Huntsmarhal for me. It's kind of awkward because then I'm forced to declare war on them and I have to try to take this army out. I might not be ready. It ends up working out in my favor, and despite what you may think, you can take out a whole army of Savage Orcs with basically nothing but an archer spam, somehow or some way. Obviously the cannon and the Outrider grenades help too, but yeah, it's possible to beat these kinds of armies with the army that I have here. Them taking out Huntsmarhal, in a way it's kind of nice because it traps them and reduces the number of enemies we have from 2 to 1. Like I said, I'm not sure if this is ideal. It hurts as much as it helps. Prevents me from having the full province, but saves me the time of chasing them through the jungle again. So I end up getting kind of lucky and catching the Blue Vipers, almost did it, in March stance, right? They're trying to run back to their territory because they're under attack by the Drowned. Like I said, you can see like this kind of army. Obviously, the grenade launcher outriders really help at this phase of the campaign, but you can beat that with what you have there. It might seem kind of scary, I guess at least for me. I was worried about attacking them. Some full Savage Orc spam should have good enough physical resist to not die so quickly to my missile units, but apparently that just wasn't the case. Anyways, it worked out. Yeah, it wasn't too difficult to wipe them out with the archers. The Imperial reinforcements helped. They're also at war with the Drowned. And so you can kind of see the pattern that this campaign takes, right? Essentially, what you want to do is try to chain targets from one to the next, right? You'll be fighting somebody. You'll have a slight advantage. Another faction will see that, take that opportunity to come in and wipe out whoever you're fighting. You can use that as an opportunity to catch that enemy while they're overextended, right? And so you can see that happening here again. We're going to be able to take out Silostra Direfin as she's sacked this city, weakened it for me. I can easily take it, and this army can't even recover this turn, so what are they going to do with it, right? And it's just going to make, like, it's a repeated pattern in this campaign. Obviously, it's true for pretty much any campaign you want to do, but especially in this campaign, chaining your targets from one to the next by taking advantage of people who overextend against an opponent that you're already defeating, right? You'll also notice that I'm moving west to capture this extra province here. Again, this province is completely empty for me. I've already scouted this settlement. I'm on my way to scout this settlement. You get all the spare heroes in this game, in this campaign from your rare, like the Wolfheart's Hunters mechanic that I discussed in the faction intro. And, I mean, I got this Empire Captain just completely at random, which is nice. But yeah, I just took a single Lord and just swept through this territory. Of course, there's a city down here that I'm going to have to run and grab. But at this stage, right, we should have an abundance of heroes. We can use them for scouting and for exploring. It's really important to do that, especially with all the, impassable terrain in this jungle. With your limited number of armies and troop quality, you just have to be careful about where you go and the fights that you take. Otherwise, you have to run back 5 turns, and it can be pretty bad. So it's important not to waste any of your movements. But you can see here, we're already on track to eliminate 2 out of our 3 targets. We're going to start taking control of all the territory we want, and then it's just going to be about building it up and securing it. So, after wiping out the Drowned and finishing our little jaunt to the north, it's of course very likely to experience another attack from the Children of the Old Ones. In general, I haven't really talked much in this campaign about managing hostility and how to react to it. It's not really something that's scripted for your campaign though, so I don't have too much to say about it. Again, I've explained the mechanic in the faction introduction. If you're not sure how it works, I'd suggest a review of that particular section. It basically amounts to every 1 or 2 opponents, 2 opponents that you defeat in the early game, or 1 major opponent like the Vampire Coast into the mid game and whoever in the late game. This is essentially the equivalent. Each one of these skulls, 10 points of hostility, is about the equivalent of beating an army and taking a settlement, which can both happen on the same turn. So you just have a couple of you have to incorporate that into your normal cycle of gameplay, right? You attack, you build up, you attack, you build up. you have to add in defend against incursions from these. If we go back just a little bit, we should at least be able to see. So yeah, I went and browsed the records, and I swear there's events that tell you. I know that when you actually reach the hostility, there's an event that will tell you. You can click on the little spyglass icon, right, and it'll give you a general location for where the army's going to spawn. Typically it spawns near your capital and attacks it. You can see that's why I have Marcus here. You can also see that I have a foundry here, and I need to get some mortars and handguns in this army, so it might be time for a little bit of an upgrade. But this is a good point in time for the campaign to get an upgrade as well, right? We've wiped out all our major threats. We don't have any like impending threats. I know the Vampire Coast is here, but they're busy fighting other people, so we're just going to let them do that. And basically, right, I've got like control of most of these provinces. I can use this extra lord that I recruited to finish settling some of these uninhabited settlements. As well as dealing with a potential rebellion that's about to occur here. With the way the map is shaped up, I actually, if you saw, I put the foundry in the Temple of Kara. I mean, you can see that the way I've developed this province is probably a little bit unusual, where I have the public order, the foundry, but basically these are all stuck at tier 3. They're not going to go up for a while. And I focused more on being able to defend this southern section properly, at least here in the center, while I was fighting up in the north, because I really only had this one primary army. With a bit of brief rest and respite here, we're going to be able to build up, get some of these provinces developed, get the income we need to supply the second army, and then we're going to be able to make our next major moves. So, one last look at things before we move on to the long-term strategy. We've had time to prepare and secure the territory, and so basically it's time to evaluate what our next moves ought to be, right? So this is where we see our short-term goals achieved. We have full control of all 3 of these provinces, right? We're building up and developing a pretty solid economy. If you notice, I have a full-size, kind of garbage hodgepodge, but a full army here, and we've got another full army here that I can, now I have 2 armies, I can deal with whatever I need to, and we're only going to get stronger as these territories continue to develop, right? We're now really entering the main mid-game, right? Our main province is 1 turn away from being able to start the level 4 building upgrade. We don't have enough money, but that's fine. We have a very safe economic province. You can't actually cross this sea, so there's really, like, nobody can attack me except perhaps from way down here in the south, which I'm not worried about, right? So we've got a solid economic province. We're going to be able to build this up and get defenses in it before anything happens, and it'll be quick to grow, easy to secure, and provide us additional income. We got 2 strong armies. We're really in a good spot, right? So now I would say it's time to switch over to long-term strategy and start to consider what our next moves should be. So now we're talking about long-term strategy for this campaign, okay? Ultimately, we're looking to secure victory and complete our victory conditions. That means that bare minimum, we need to control basically all of Lustria with the exception of the spine of Sotek, right? And we also need to control the Galleon's graveyard for whatever reason, but that's that. We also need to destroy a number of factions, most of which we haven't, like some of which we haven't encountered, most of which we have not destroyed, right? So despite me setting early game targets, those early game targets aren't technically part of your victory conditions. And then you need to fill your acclaim meter, which of course that will happen naturally as we build more ports and collect more settlements. So where do we begin? The first thing you want to look at is the status of nearby factions, right? We have Hexwaddle to the north. We have the Vampire Coast to the east, and we can't see them, but we know that Itza is to the south, right? Now, in this campaign, they're all in a relative stalemate, right? Hexwaddle not really getting anywhere. They're at war with the New World colonies, and you can see it's like nobody has control here yet, right? Same thing for the Vampire Coast. They're at war with the Lizardmen, and like, look at this. How do they have this one? This army stranded, right? And we don't even see Itza, so I'm not really concerned about them being a threat. If they were expanding north, I'd have more reason to be concerned, right? This is good for us. It means that at this stage, we're in the lead, right? And we can either choose to wait and build up our settlements, or select any of them as our next target, or even select an alternate target so we can grow without disrupting the current balance of power, right? Now, if one of these factions is dominant at this stage of your campaign, right? If Hexwaddle has wiped out the New World colonies and has been like building up or sitting on your doorstep, or it might already even be attacking you, because you can see Potwash still isn't built and I don't have walls in there or nothing. So if Hexwaddle is big, if the Vampire Coast has already beaten the Cult of Sotek, or perhaps Itza and the Cult of Sotek have worked together to push out some of these other forces infesting their lands, right? If you have a bigger power, somebody that's closer to rivaling your power, now's a good time to start making a move against them, right? Commit, like I said, that's why I have these defenses committed down here. Commit some defenses to whatever border you're not pushing forward on, and try to push forward and wipe them out, while you have a chance to fight them when everybody else is relatively weak. Otherwise, like if you go after another weak faction, you're just kind of giving that strong faction an opportunity to build up and attack you while you're spread too thin. But in my case specifically, I actually decide to target the Sentinels of Jati, right? I'm planning on being friends with the dwarves as a human player. It's at least a good chance of them being friends with me, especially compared to basically everybody else on this continent. Maybe Teclis, but I'm pretty sure he's already dead. I know that when I get there, he's done. But so I want to be friends with the dwarves. I don't need this territory. It's unpleasant climate for me anyway. And the Sentinels of Jati are kind of like locked in this corner, right? So I can take them out. It's not really going to affect my diplomacy at all. It's going to be great territory, and it's going to be super easy to secure, right? There is also a little Skaven infestation still lingering in the spine of Sotek, and so we can kind of sneak in here and take that out for them. I mean, I can't see it right, but I know that that's what's there. And so being able to do that, build up some relations, establish diplomacy, and then grow myself, like I said, without disrupting the balance of power. That's the route I'm going to show here. Like I said, if somebody else has strength or is closer to your balance of power, you probably want to focus on them and at least weaken them, if not outright destroy them, right? So let's kind of take a look at how this plays out. So we jump into the future a little bit here. We see what the Sentinels of Jati defeated, and the actual most recent hostility threat is cleared. That means that it's time to review the map and select the next target, right? Somehow Hexwaddle has been losing horribly to the New World colonies. I mean, obviously that doesn't bother me, right? I normally don't see Hexwaddle do well, but this is truly awful. Works great for me, though. Let somebody else do the dirty work. 3 settlements. They're not going to keep all 3 for very long, I tell you that much. So, obviously this means we turn our attention towards Greater Lustria, right? While they're not entirely dominant, it does seem like the Vampire Coast is probably the bigger threat here at the moment. And of course, they're also encroaching on my borders, right? We've got their territory. They're starting to take territory very close to me, whereas, nobody else is really this close to me. It's a good reason. But they also have wiped out the Cult of Sotek. So despite the fact that Itza will probably be stronger and do better, I mean, you can see, like, the Vampire Coast. We take a look here. I mean, even if I sort by, like, who's the strongest, yeah. I mean, there you go. This answers the question pretty easily for you. Who should I fight next? The only person who's stronger than my friends, right? So, in order to keep myself safe, the best bet is to take them out. This will kind of help relieve pressure on the remaining Lizardmen, but I can see, actually, that they are still at war with Clan Pestilence, who I haven't discovered yet. Since we haven't even met them, that means that this southern region is going to be held in that same kind of stalemate for a little while. Certainly long enough for us to wipe this out, take power, and prepare ourselves for the next incursion to the south, right? Now, again, this is what I did for my campaign, but the point of long-term strategy is that your situation may vary. You will probably need to adjust this plan depending on who is in power or what threats you are facing, right? If Hexwaddle has built up enough at this point, or whoever's broken the stalemate that was happening at turn 50, basically, is what you're going to want to focus on. You might not have even had the chance to go after the Sentinels of Jati in the first place. Maybe the Skaven are dominating, or maybe the Lizardmen teamed up and got a nice head start. In this campaign, Teclis is dead, but he could be alive and shifting the balance of power in your campaign. And overall, Lustria is so dense with playable factions that there's a lot of power struggling going on, right? But you should essentially be the most powerful player if you've gotten this far in the campaign without too much of an issue keeping momentum in the early game. However, if you're not, and you don't really feel comfortable breaking the balance of power in these other places, you might try to have one of your armies quick go and take the Sentinels anyway, just to try to, it's like a free take to bolster your strength regardless, right? But as for me, like I said, next most powerful person is the Vampire Coast, so it's time for them to die. So, a little ways further, and we can see, once again, we're at the end of another cycle, right? We just triggered another hostility thing that caused a rebellion. You can see this one, we actually it spawned here at the province capital instead of my faction capital for once. And of course, now we have to chase across the jungle, everybody's favorite chore. but we've taken out the vampire coast at this stage, right? Now, it's not like they were really all that big and powerful, right? It seems like it in the balance of power, but the reality is they're just winning, right? They're just winning the war against another opponent. But that generally, like I said earlier, the pattern about taking out people who are fighting another target, well, we're going to see that come into play more here. But since they're already fighting, even though they're winning that fight, it actually makes a good opportunity for us to undercut the stronger player, defeat them, and then clean up the scraps of the weaker player as well, right? As you can see, my next step here is to take out Itza and the rest of the Lizardmen factions, right? It's the land I want. It's next to me. It'll be the most natural for me to take, and it's also the easiest for me to hold. If we come down here and look, right, I know the Skaven are still here. We have the Blessed Dread over here to the east. Now, they could flank me, but generally, if I have this settlement and this settlement, that's all I need, and I can control all of this, like both of these factions in the southeast at the same time, right? So I kind of want to take this central territory and be able to hold that. We also, like, this looks almost scary, right? But then you click on the army, and it's like, oh, okay, it's like 50% skinks, right? We have like a mostly serious army here, a couple of flaws, a wounded character, and a couple of mortars in here, but overall, it's a pretty easy take, right? Again, the pattern of, so they took this, the Lizardmen took this from the Vampire Coast, kind of overextended themselves. This army's trapped in the city, and they might have one other army, but these guys are still at war with the Skaven and the Blessed Dread, right? So for them to take this, clear overextension on their part, this army, as soon as it deals with this, can move south. We should be able to just sweep these settlements really quickly and pretty easily. So, like I said, you know, since Itza had basically been close to being pushed into a corner, they even wouldn't be stronger than me if they had full strength on all three of those settlements. It really doesn't take that long to wipe them out or to wipe out the Wardens of the Sacred Pools. Again, you can see here that Pestilence took one of their cities, and this is one of those cornerstone cities for my defensive perimeter that I talked about. But of course, the reality is, at this stage, we're probably strong enough to attack the Blessed Dread and Clan Pestilence at the same time if we wanted. Maybe not the best idea, but we're taking a little bit of downtime here to kind of refit and upgrade my main army to be, you know, more appropriate to the point of progress that we're at. And I've just refitted my second army as well, and I'm sending it down. And at this point, we clearly have the income to afford a third. I mean, we could afford 2 more armies if we really wanted, but I haven't even needed them just because of, you know, careful target prioritization, selection, a little bit of good fortune with the New World colonies being strong here. But you can see, like, this end of the campaign is pretty fortified. For somebody to attack this northern flank, it'd be difficult for them to do. Not to mention that if I could look at one of these, you know, I can't, they're not organized well, but of course I'm going to have plenty of Imperial reinforcements at this stage too, so to instantly summon an army to defend this would mean almost nothing to me, right? So we're in a really good spot here. We can push through them. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I can afford a third army here. We could probably afford a fourth. We're also seeing more diplomatic options open up as we discover the world. We've got the High Elves trading with us at this time. For some reason, we got some weird attacks on us that are totally irrelevant, so I'm not going to discuss it really. But yeah, we also can afford to really easily take some more of these kinds of research to get our diplomacy bonuses to those kinds of factions, to establish more diplomacy, establish more trade agreements, stuff like that, and really just secure ourselves. Like, we're already in such a good position. Let's just go ahead a little bit more and wrap things up. So, with our last little look here, we can see that the Skaven are fairly easily dealt with, right? Same story I've been telling this entire guide. This city, right, had an army in it, and what have I said so far about attacking an opponent who overextends when they're fighting the same person that you're fighting, right? They took this from the Lizardmen, just gave me an opportunity to take it from them. They actually full sent the rest of their forces over to the Spine of Sotek Dwarves. I took a defensive alliance with them, basically so that I could just eliminate their entire armed forces in a single attack. And now we have everything of theirs. We got them pinned here in the Mangrove Coast. I'm basically waiting on this until I could get my people into place because, of course, this will trigger another response by the Lizardmen. And from there, we're just kind of getting ourselves into position to posture against the Dark Elves and attack them pretty much immediately after that problem is dealt with. Still don't have another army, but we've got some even higher quality troops in some of these places now. So that's kind of what's holding me back. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, right? We have almost control of Lustria. I don't know what strength rating we're at, 8, but it doesn't even really matter because at this point, you should feel pretty secure in a campaign that looks like this, right? We're still building diplomacy a little bit and can get more trade with the High Elves that are nearby, right? If we look at them, I mean, I'm sure I can get like some trade agreements with them here, so we can take that research and get it done, right? We can take control of the rest of Lustria with very relative ease. All we have left after this basically is the Galleon's Graveyard and this northern jungle of Pahwala, and we're done, right? We're almost at enough. We need 3 more acclaim. Literally taking this settlement should probably be enough for that. We might have to betray the New World colonies. I mean, I can try to get a defensive alliance with them in order to get that territory from shared, but it's not like we can confederate them. And it's really good territory that they're keeping safe for us that would be valuable to us, you know, moving beyond this point of the campaign if you wanted to play it out further. This would be really great to hold and make money off of, right? So generally speaking, that's it for this campaign. You can see how it took shape over time. Yours are likely to be similar. The reality is that with so many playable factions in Lustria, it's very common for them to just kind of have this perpetual stalemate where nobody really gains an advantage. If somebody does gain an advantage early on, you simply just target them earlier on. If nobody gains an advantage, you take the time to build your own by wiping out any other minor factions or trying to build up some diplomatic agreements with some of the people that you want to keep alive for a little bit. But yeah, the early game, has a lot of dancing around and is fairly slow paced. It's easy to make a small mistake, which turns out very costly when you're still trying to lock down this province. But the reality is, if you can make it through the first couple phases, right, taking out Tlaxcalan and then starting to like win fights against the Blue Vipers, that's basically all you need to do to win this campaign. If you can do that and carry that momentum forward, you'll easily win. The biggest piece of the mid-game is just figuring out who to take on, and that's just based on the size that they are, right? If we're still seeing stalemates across the board, you just kind of wait and find something else to do, or just like reduce your army number a little bit so that you can get more income and build up your settlements faster. If you make the right choice in the mid-game, the late game is basically a free win. I mean, you can see I'm steamrolling all these people with no contest at this point. It really helps if you can get some high-tech troops early on too. I slacked off on even getting tier 4 foundry because we can just get those kinds of units through the Imperial Supplies mechanic. And so being able to get high-tech troops early on really helps build your momentum and just give you an advantage in the early game. And yeah, to even need the building is like not necessary sometimes. So that should be everything that I wanted to address for this campaign. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new along the way. It can be a challenging campaign in a lot of ways, but in other ways it is a lot of fun and it really favors you if you get your momentum going. It's a very fun faction to play in a highly contested location. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please remember to like and subscribe below, and feel free to leave any feedback or your own tips in the comments section below. With that being said, have a great day, and we'll see you on the next one.